That was how it started. My 13-year-old nephew Caleb looked down at my son and didn't just ask him to move. He ordered it like he was speaking to a stray dog. He pointed his fork at the kitchen door and said loud enough for everyone on the deck to hear, "Waiters eat in the kitchen. Trash belongs outside." My son Leo, just 7 years old, froze. He looked at me, his eyes wide, waiting for the adults to fix it. I looked at my mother, Evelyn. I looked at my sister, Vanessa. I waited for the scolding. I waited for them to defend the little boy trembling in his chair. Instead, they just raised their glasses of the expensive wine I had paid for. They didn't scream. They didn't correct him. They smirked. That tiny, cruel curl of the lip told me everything I needed to know. I didn't say a single word. I stood up, grabbed Leo's hand and walked out of that house for the very last time. If your family smirked while your child was being bullied, would you flip the table or would you leave in silence like I did? Drop a comment below and tell me your move. I read every single one. The drive home was deafening. It wasn't the silence of peace. It was the heavy, suffocating silence of a crime scene. In the rearview mirror I watched Leo. He wasn't crying. He was staring out the window at the passing streetlights, his small hand pressed against the glass. He was dissociating. He was 6 years old and he was already learning the family survival skill I had perfected over 3 decades. Disappear so they can't hurt you. Seeing him like that, fading into the upholstery of the SUV, something inside me snapped. But it didn't snap like a twig. It snapped like a lock falling into place. My grip on the steering wheel tightened until my knuckles turned white. For years, my mother Evelyn and my sister Vanessa had a name for me. They called me the calculator. They called me boring, rigid, and stingy. At parties, Vanessa would introduce me with a laugh, saying, "This is Lena, she stares at spreadsheets all day so we don't have to." They mocked my career as a forensic accountant. To them, I was just a drone who didn't understand passion or the finer things in life. The irony was acidic enough to burn a hole through the floorboard. The boring job they mocked was the only reason they had a floorboard to stand on. The rigid spreadsheets they laughed at were the only reason Vanessa wasn't being evicted from that lake house. They treated me like a wallet that had accidentally developed a personality. I looked at the road, but I saw a ledger. My mind started working the way it does when I'm brought in to audit a failing company. I don't look at the emotions of the CEO. I look at the outflows. I look for the rot. And for the first time I turned that cold, high-powered lens on my own life. Why had I stayed? Why had I kept signing the checks? For 7 years I had been operating under a silent contract. I believed that if I paid enough, if I covered the mortgage, the renovations, the medical bills, the endless emergencies, I was buying equity in this family. I thought I was purchasing respect. I thought I was securing a safe place for my son. I treated my mother's affection like a dividend that was just delayed, believing that if I invested just a little more, the payout would finally come. But the smirk gave it away. That smirk on the deck wasn't just cruelty. It was data. It was proof that my investment had yielded 0 returns. Actually, it was worse than 0. My money hadn't bought respect. It had subsidized their cruelty. I had financed the very lifestyle that allowed them to look down on us. I paid for the wine they drank while they ignored my son. I paid for the deck they stood on while they called him trash. I wasn't a daughter anymore. I wasn't a sister. Those titles imply a relationship based on blood and love. This was a relationship based on extraction. I was a resource. And when a resource becomes self-aware, the extraction stops. I pulled into our driveway. The house was dark. Leo was asleep before I even turned off the engine, exhausted by the trauma of being humiliated by the people who were supposed to love him. I carried him inside, his head heavy on my shoulder, his breathing soft and rhythmic. I laid him down in his bed, pulled the duvet up to his chin and brushed the hair off his forehead. "I'm sorry," I whispered to the dark room. "I'm sorry I bought us a seat at a table where we were on the menu." I walked out of his room and didn't go to mine. I went straight to my home office. I didn't turn on the overhead lights. The glow of the monitors was enough. I sat down in my ergonomic chair, the one Vanessa made fun of because it wasn't aesthetic, and woke up my computer. Sadness is a luxury for people who can afford to be helpless. I couldn't afford that. I didn't feel like crying. I felt like working. I cracked my knuckles and opened the banking portal. It was time to audit the books. The screen glowed with the stark, unforgiving light of a spreadsheet. In my line of work, numbers don't lie. People lie. Receipts lie. But the raw data of a bank statement? That is the brutal truth. And the truth was staring back at me in red font. I filtered the transaction history for the last 30 days. It wasn't just a list of expenses. It was an autopsy of my own exploitation. Transfer to Evelyn medical stipend, $800. Transfer to Vanessa caretaker allowance, $850. Direct payment Lake House mortgage, $3,200. Total monthly outflow, $4,850. I sat back, the air in the room suddenly feeling thin. That was nearly $50,000 a year. Over the last 7 years, I had poured over $300,000 into a family that wouldn't let my son sit at the main table. I didn't feel generous anymore. I felt like a fool. A highly educated, well-paid, certified fool. My mouse hovered over the recurring transfers tab. My hand didn't shake. There was no hesitation, no sentimental pause to remember the good times. Because there hadn't been any. There had only been transaction times. Select all. A warning box popped up. Are you sure you want to cancel all recurring payments to Evelyn and Vanessa? This action cannot be undone. I'm counting on it, I whispered. Confirm. The screen refreshed. The scheduled transfers column was now blank. Just like that, the financial foredrip that had kept their toxicity alive was severed. Next, I opened my email client. I didn't type a tear-stained letter about how much they hurt me. I typed a business memo. Subject: Notice of financial cessation. To Evelyn Vanessa. Effective immediately, all third-party financial support provided by Lena is terminated. This includes but is not limited to the Lake House mortgage, medical stipends, and discretionary allowances. I advise you to arrange alternative funding for all future obligations. Do not contact me to negotiate. Regards, Lena. I hit send before I could overthink the tone. It was done. Now I know what you're thinking. You're looking at that $300,000 figure and asking, why, Lena? Why did you pay for 7 years if they treated you like this? It's a fair question. And the answer isn't love. It's economics. Specifically, a trap called the sunk cost fallacy. In finance, a sunk cost is money you've already spent and can never get back. A rational investor ignores sunk costs. If a business is failing, you close it. You don't throw another $1 million at it just because you've already spent $1 million. That's how you go bankrupt. But in relationships, we are terrible investors. For 7 years, I treated my mother's love like a failing stock that was bound to bounce back. Every time I wrote a check, I told myself I've already invested so much time, so much pain, so much money. If I walk away now, it was all for nothing. I have to keep paying until it pays off. I was terrified to close the account because that would mean admitting that the profit, their love, was never coming. I was trying to average down on a scam. Tonight, looking at that blank transfer screen, I finally accepted the loss. The $300,000 was gone. It was never coming back. And that was okay. Because the only thing worse than losing 7 years and $300,000 is losing 7 years and 1 day and $300,001. I wasn't saving the relationship anymore. I was cutting my losses to save the only asset that still had value, my son. I closed the laptop. The room went dark. For the first time in a decade, I didn't go to sleep worrying about their bills. I went to sleep knowing that tomorrow the market was going to crash. And I couldn't wait to watch it fall. Monday morning broke with the silence of a pending lawsuit. I made Leo breakfast, packed his lunch, and drove him to school. He was quiet, but he wasn't shaking anymore. That was the first dividend of my decision. At 9 a.m. sharp, the banks opened. At 9:05 a.m. the text messages started. It began with Vanessa. Her messages weren't questions. They were frantic digital screams. Payment didn't go through. Fix it. Mom is stressing out. Do you want her to end up in the ER? Pick up the phone, Lena. You're being selfish. I put my phone face down on my desk and continued organizing my case files for work. I didn't block them yet. I needed the data. In an audit, you never destroy the paper trail. You let the subject generate more evidence. When Vanessa's aggression didn't work, the strategy shifted. At 10:30 a.m. my phone rang. The screen said Mom. This was the nuclear option. In toxic family dynamics, we call this the extinction burst. When you stop feeding a narcissist their supply, whether it's money or attention, they don't just accept it. They escalate. They panic. They throw everything they have at the wall to see what sticks. I answered. Hello. Lena. Her voice wasn't the strong, commanding tone she used at Sunday dinner. It was a breathless, fragile whisper. My chest. It feels heavy. I stared at the wall, my hand tightening on the phone. What's wrong, Mom? The stress, she wheezed. Vanessa told me you cut us off. I got so worked up. My heart is fluttering again. I need my medication, Lena. The pharmacy won't fill it without the copay. It's $200. She paused, waiting for the sound of my guilt. I can't breathe well, she added, laying it on thick. Please. Do you want me to die over $200? This is a tactic called triangulation. Vanessa is the attack dog, biting at my ankles. Mom is the fragile victim, collapsing on the fainting couch. And I am the villain in the middle, holding the cure. For a second, just a split second, the conditioning kicked in. My stomach dropped. The old script started running in my head. You're a bad daughter. You're killing her. Just send the money. It's only $200. Is your pride worth her life? I almost opened the banking app. I almost surrendered. But then I remembered the smirk. I remembered her sipping Pinot Noir while her grandson was called trash. I remembered the strength in her hand when she held that wine glass. Lena, she whispered. Are you there? I'm here, I said. My voice was different now. It wasn't the voice of a scared daughter. It was the voice of an auditor finding a discrepancy. If you're having chest pains, Mom, that's a medical emergency. It is, she said quickly. That's why I need the money. No, I replied. If it's an emergency, you don't need a bank transfer. You need an ambulance. Silence on the other end. I'm calling 911 for you right now, I said, my finger hovering over the hang-up button. I'll have them send a paramedic to the lake house. They can stabilize you. No. Her voice suddenly snapped back to full volume. The breathless whisper vanished instantly. Don't you dare call an ambulance. I don't need a scene, Lena. I just need my pills. If you're well enough to yell, you're well enough to manage your own budget, I said. You ungrateful little. I hung up. My heart was pounding, but my head was clear. She wasn't sick. She was performing. But a performance isn't proof. As a forensic accountant, I don't rely on gut feelings. I rely on receipts. She claimed she needed money for heart medication. She claimed the pharmacy was waiting. Okay, Mom, I said to the silent room. Let's see what the pharmacy has to say. I turned back to my computer. I was still the legal guarantor on the joint account used for her medical expenses. I had legal access to see every single transaction. I cracked my knuckles. It was time for a deep dive. The screen refreshed and I was in. Because I was the co-signer on the loan and the guarantor for the checking account attached to it, I didn't need to hack anything. I had full administrative privileges. They always forgot that part. They treated me like a distant ATM, forgetting that the ATM has a record of every single withdrawal. I navigated to the Joint Checking Medical Expenses tab. This account was supposed to be sacred. It was funded by me exclusively for my mother's health care. Prescriptions, copays, specialist visits. In my head, I had built a picture of how this money was used. Sad, necessary trips to the pharmacy, maybe the occasional ergonomic pillow for her back. I sorted the ledger by date. Last 30 days. The first transaction wasn't a pharmacy. Sephora, $142.50. I stared at it. Maybe she needed medicinal moisturizer? I kept scrolling. Total Wine and More, $218. Lulu's Bistro, $86. Cinema City, $45. I felt a cold, hard knot tighten in my stomach. There was no CVS. There was no Walgreens. There was no cardiologist. My mother, the woman who had just wheezed into the phone claiming she was on death's door, had spent nearly $500 last week on premium cable, expensive makeup, and enough Pinot Noir to sedate a horse. I wasn't angry. Anger is hot and messy. What I felt was the icy clarity of an auditor discovering embezzlement. This wasn't a mistake. It was misappropriation of funds. They were laundering my sympathy into a lifestyle they couldn't afford. But these were small charges. Annoying, yes. Disrespectful, absolutely. But they didn't explain where all the money went. I was sending thousands and these charges only added up to a few hundred. Where is the rest of it? I whispered. I changed the filter parameters. Instead of recent transactions, I switched to recurring autodrafts. The screen blinked. The small charges vanished. Only one line remained. A massive, monthly hemorrhage that drained the account the moment my deposit hit. Recurring transfer. $2,400. Recipient. SE Academy Bursar. My hand hovered over the mouse. The Academy. The name sounded vaguely familiar, but I couldn't place it. Was it a specialized clinic? A rehabilitation center? My mother was secretly battling something serious, something she was too ashamed to tell me about. Then maybe I was the monster. Maybe this was medical. I opened a new tab and typed SGE Academy into the search bar. I expected to see doctors in white coats. I expected to see a hospice facility. I hit enter. The search results loaded instantly. It wasn't a hospital. The logo was a golden crest with a lion and a shield. The tagline read, St. Jude's Elite Academy, preparing tomorrow's leaders today. I froze. I clicked on the admissions tab. I clicked on tuition and fees. Junior high tuition grades 6 to 8, $28,800 per annum. Monthly installment plan, $2,400. The numbers matched perfectly. Down to the penny. I sat back in my chair, the breath leaving my lungs in a sharp hiss. It wasn't medical bills. It wasn't a heart condition. I had been paying for private school. Specifically, I had been paying for Caleb's private school. The realization hit me like a physical blow. Vanessa, my struggling sister who couldn't afford rent, who needed a caretaker allowance because she was too busy looking after our sick mother, was sending her son to the most expensive prep school in the county. And I was the one paying for it. I closed my eyes. I saw Caleb's face on the deck. I heard his voice. Trash belongs outside. The irony was so sharp it drew blood. The boy who called my son trash was wearing a blazer bought with my money. He was learning Latin and lacrosse in a school funded by the aunt he despised, while my son, the trash, went to public school and wore hand-me-downs because I was too tight on money to buy him the new sneakers he wanted. I wasn't just a victim. I was the financier of my own son's bullying. I opened my eyes. I didn't cry. I reached for the printer. Print, I said. The machine whirred to life in the corner, spitting out the evidence page by page. The sound was rhythmic, like a gavel coming down. Whir, slam, whir, slam. I grabbed the stack of warm paper. I had the medical ledger. I had the St. Jude's website printout. I had the transfer history. The audit was complete. Now it was time to deliver the report. Tuesday morning didn't arrive with a sunrise. It arrived with an assault on my front door. I was in the kitchen pouring coffee when the pounding started. It wasn't a polite knock. It was the frantic, entitled hammering of people who have never been told no in their entire lives. I checked the security camera feed on my phone. Evelyn and Vanessa. They looked deranged. Vanessa was pacing, shouting at the wood, while Evelyn leaned against the doorframe, clutching her chest in a theatrical display of agony that disappeared the second she thought no one was looking. I didn't rush. I took a sip of coffee. But bitter. Perfect. I walked to the entryway. I didn't chain the door. I didn't hide. I unlocked the deadbolt and swung it open. Are you insane? Vanessa screamed before I could even blink. She pushed past me into the foyer, her face blotchy with rage. You cut off the transfers? Mom was in the ER all night because of you. She could have died. Evelyn shuffled in behind her, playing the part of the frail martyr. I don't know what I did to raise such a cold child, she whispered, dabbing at dry eyes. To leave your mother suffering, over money. It's not just money. Vanessa yelled. It's respect. You think because you have some boring desk job you can control us? Put the money back, Lena. No. Or I swear to God I will tell everyone what you did. I leaned against the wall, crossing my arms. I watched them perform. It was fascinating, really. They were so committed to the lie that they had actually convinced themselves it was true. Are you finished? I asked. My voice was low, flat, and completely devoid of temperature. Vanessa blinked, thrown off by my lack of shouting. No. We're not finished until you fix this. Hey, I said. Let's fix it. I reached for the file folder I had left on the hallway table. I handed it to Vanessa. What is this? She snapped. It's an audit, I said. Page 1 is a summary of the medical expenses account. Vanessa froze. Her eyes darted to Evelyn. Evelyn suddenly stopped clutching her chest. The room went silent. I see a lot of Sephora, I said, stepping closer. I see a lot of Pinot Noir. I see zero heart medication. You invaded my privacy. Evelyn shrieked, her frailty vanishing instantly. I audited a joint account, I corrected. But that's just petty cash. Turn to page 2. Vanessa didn't turn the page. Her hand was shaking. Turn it, I said. It was an order. She flipped the page. There, highlighted in bright yellow, was the line item. SE Academy Bursar. $2,400. St. Jude's, I said softly. A lovely school. Very prestigious. I hear they have a zero-tolerance policy for bullying. Which is interesting considering who attends. Vanessa went pale. Lena, I can explain. He needed a better environment. The public schools are dangerous. My son goes to public school, I said. The son you called trash. The son whose lunch money I budget carefully so that I can send you $3,000 a month. I have been financing the education of the boy who torments my child. It's for his future. Evelyn interjected, trying to regain ground. Caleb has potential. We couldn't let it go to waste just because you're jealous. Jealousy is an emotion, I said. This is fraud. But I'm not going to sue you for the tuition. I consider that the cost of education. My education. I learned exactly who you are. Fine, Vanessa spat, throwing the papers on the floor. So you caught us. Big deal. You're still going to pay the mortgage. Unless you want mom on the street. You're on the deed, Lena. You're the guarantor. If we lose the house, your credit is ruined too. So you're stuck with us. She smirked. It was the same smirk from Sunday. The smirk of someone who thinks they have leverage. I smiled back. But my smile didn't reach my eyes. I'm glad you brought up the mortgage, I said. I got a call from the bank yesterday. Apparently you haven't made a payment in 3 months. They were initiating foreclosure proceedings. Exactly, Vanessa scoffed. So pay it. Or ruin your credit. Your choice. I made a choice, I said. I didn't pay the arrears for you. I exercised my right as the guarantor to buy out the note. Vanessa's smirk faltered. What? I paid off the loan, I said. I wired the full balance this morning. The bank is out of the picture. They transferred the lien to me. I reached into the folder and pulled out one final document. It wasn't a spreadsheet. It was a thick legal notice with a red stamp at the top. I own the debt now, Vanessa. Which means I own the house. I handed her the paper. Notice to quit. Vacate premises within 30 days. You can't evict your mother, Evelyn gasped, grabbing the banister for support. This time her shock was real. I'm not evicting my mother, I said calmly. I'm evicting my tenants. Tenants who haven't paid rent, who destroyed the property value, and who abused the landlord. I opened the front door. The morning light flooded in, harsh and bright. You have 30 days, I said. If you're not out, the sheriff will remove you. And knowing Caleb, he'll probably enjoy the police escort. Lena, please, Vanessa begged, the tears finally real. Where will we go? I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had smirked while my son was humiliated. And I pointed to the driveway. Trash belongs outside, I said. Get off my property. 1 month later, the silence in my house was different. It wasn't heavy anymore. It was light. It was clean. The legal proceedings were handled entirely by my attorney. I blocked their numbers. I blocked their emails. I didn't check their social media. I didn't care where they went. They were liabilities I had written off the books. It was Tuesday night. Pizza night. Leo sat at the kitchen table, a slice of pepperoni in one hand and a crayon in the other. He was drawing a picture of us, just the two of us, standing on top of a mountain. He was smiling. I sat across from him. I looked at the 2 empty chairs at the end of the table. For years I had been terrified of those empty chairs. I thought an empty chair meant failure. I thought it meant I was unlovable, unwanted, broken. I had filled them with people who hurt me just to avoid seeing the vacancy. But tonight, looking at the empty space, I didn't feel lonely. I felt safe. There is a dignity in the empty chair. It represents standards. It represents the self-respect to say, I would rather sit alone than sit with people who make me feel small. An empty chair isn't a void. It's a boundary. It's a reserved space for peace. I took a bite of my pizza. Tasted like freedom. I had audited my life. I had liquidated the bad assets. And for the first time in 36 years I was solvent. Have you ever kept a toxic person in your life just because you were afraid of the empty chair? Share your story below. I'm reading every single one.